mainly try to share my experience as a woman in nuclear and also a young generation in nuclear, because I'm not going to lie, the age gap that there is between, for example, my colleagues and myself, or colleagues like my age, is very huge, super huge. So what I'm also trying to do with this Twitter project or Twitter handle is to reach out to younger generations and invite them to become part of this incredible industry. You don't need to be an engineer. You can be anything else, but come to the nuclear side.
Just because the facts are A, if the narrative is B and everyone believes the narrative, then B is what matters. But it's our job in our industry to speak up proudly, soberly, and to engage people in this dialogue. Those 2.5 billion people that are in energy poverty, they need us.
America cannot meet this threat alone.
If there is a single country,
of course, the world cannot meet it without America.
that is willing to
We're going to need you, the next generation, to finish the
overhaul
job.
nuclear regulation
We need scientists to design new
and
fuels.
focus on net public
We
benefit
need engineers to invent new technologies. We
over absurd levels of radiation
need
protection,
entrepreneurs to sell those
then
technologies.
we will march towards this.
We need workers to operate assembly lines that hum with high-tech,
where
zero-carbon
we have
components.
unlimited prosperity for all humans.
We need diplomats and businessmen and women and Peace Corps volunteers to help developing nations skip past the dirty phase of development and transition to sustainable sources of energy. In other words, we need you.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Fire to Fission podcast, where we talk about energy-dense fuels and how they better human lives. My name's Mark Heineman, and I'm joined today by Jenifer Avellaneda. Did I get that right?
Yes, that's great. Hi, Mark, and
Thanks.
hello, everyone listening in.
Yeah, so Jenifer's a risk analyst at Westinghouse, but she's better known for her Twitter handle, Nuclear Hazelnut. So I'm very excited to chat with her. Jenifer, we'll dive into your handle on Twitter and some of your advocacy work, but why don't you give the audience kind of a quick 30 to 60 second background intro?
Yes, of course, and thank you so much again for the invite. So, hello, everyone. Hello, Mark. My name is Jenifer Avellaneda. I'm originally from Mexico City. I was born and raised there, but now I'm currently living in Texas, the great state of Texas, United States.
A country of its own.
And yeah. Well, my passion for nuclear energy began at the young age of 12 years old. And ever since then, I've been actively advocating for its advancement and development and, saying information out loud and my opinion and trying to advocate for nuclear technology and energy as well. I hold a degree in Sustainable Development Engineering from the Monterrey Institute of Technology and Higher Education in Mexico. And, my journey in the world of nuclear energy started with a very transformative experience that I had at the International Atomic Energy Agency in Austria, Vienna. I was doing an internship over there, and during that, I was working at the Technical Cooperation Program. So I had the privilege to work hand in hand with many diplomats as well as project managers by actively contributing and also developing certain projects related to the peaceful uses of nuclear technologies for different member states. And fast forward, now I'm at Westinghouse Electric Company. I'm a nuclear risk analyst engineer, and I love what I do for a living. I'm very excited.
That's incredible. I can't wait to dive into a bunch of that. So let's talk about your time. First off, I'll say it back, make sure I heard you correctly. So educated in Mexico.
That's correct.
Yep. Work in Texas now. Okay.
Yes.
Why at such a young age were you fascinated by nuclear?
That is a very funny story. I like to read thrillers a lot, or many novels, but I usually prefer thrillers. And I got a copy of The Angels and Demons by Dan Brown, the writer of Da Vinci Code. And throughout that story, there's a couple of events that happened at CERN, which is a center of development and advancement of nuclear technology in Europe and many countries surrounding it. So I started doing my research, like, for example, what's antimatter, which is actually mentioned as part of the story. And then one thing led to another, and I ended up reading all the information about nuclear energy, nuclear technologies, nuclear power plants, and also nuclear weapons, because hard to believe they're very much related. Whenever you look for the word nuclear, you have those two, the peaceful uses and not so the peaceful uses. And that's how my interest started back then. That, along with some news in the media, that for the very first time I also heard the term climate change or global warming. And at the very young age, I got very concerned about those two things, because it's like, is the world is going to end? What's going on, or what is happening with the weather? I feel like it's okay, but many times you get to read the media, or not only Twitter, but certain news, or even the radio, the newspaper. Back then I used to read the newspapers. And you read all of these terms, and at that very young age I was very concerned. So I made like the relation. So if we have this technology, the nuclear technology, why aren't we using it for peaceful uses? Why? This is like part of the key that we need to start developing, supporting, and, continuously using in order to stop this climate change thing or this global warming thing. So that's how my interest in this nuclear technology or nuclear energy industry started. And ever since then, I have just, kept reading books, novels, interviews, TED Talks, news. And not so long ago, I recently started using Twitter to share the little things that I know, the little things that excited me. And it has been an amazing journey, because there are many people out there with similar opinions as mine. And even if we do not share an opinion, it has been also very interesting to have educated discussions online. So it has been a great journey, but that's how we all started. So thanks to Dan Brown.
Who knew? Too bad they didn't make they need to make did they make a film of that one, Angels and Demons?
I think so, but they changed the end.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a spoiler, but they did.
Okay. So, and then you spent some time at the IAEA. I always mess up this acronym. IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. It's a hard acronym. Yeah. Like, why would
it is
valves?
It is, but you get used to it.
Were you actually over in Vienna?
Yes, I lived there for almost 10 months, 10, 11.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm jealous.
But I didn't learn German.
You don't have to. All the Germans speak English. They say they don't, but they do.
Have you ever heard when they say life is too short to learn German? Well, it is, because I give it a try.
Yeah. What was that like? What kind of projects were you working on over there?
Most of the projects were already part of their nuclear energy program. So that depends on the member states. But I also learned that there are types of projects. So there are the national projects, the regional projects, which include several member states throughout a certain region, and also international projects. There are interregional projects, I think they're called. I forgot the name. Interregional projects, in which these projects can interact certain countries at a certain specific area with other countries at a very different location. So these projects are mainly focused on the, of course, peaceful uses of nuclear technologies, but they are not only focused on the nuclear energy programs of these countries. They're also related to, for example, medicine or agriculture or even space development or research, And it was very interesting. I worked with Latin American countries. So that was like the area in which I was part of the technical cooperation program at the IAEA. So I guess I was very lucky, because that is the direct interaction that the agency have with the member states. So as I told you previously, I interacted with many diplomats, and I got to hear from them directly what was going on at their countries. It was a very interesting experience. I am so lucky I got to experience that.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you go straight to Westinghouse from there, or did you have something in between?
I got something in between, but it's not related to the nuclear energy industry. Actually, I moved from Mexico to Vienna to work there. So I graduated, obtained my degree, moved to Austria, Vienna, worked there for a couple of months, almost a year. And then I came back to the US because I'm very united with my family. They were all living there, mom, dad, and a sister. So I came back here, started to looking for a job, and it took me approximately six to 9 months to find this incredible opportunity at Westinghouse. But in the meantime, I was working at Salada, which is a restaurant.
There you go. All
So,
right.
my background it's incredibly huge with many different skills.
Yeah. How long you been at Westinghouse?
I've been there 3 years and 6 months so
Okay,
far.
great. Yeah. So
Mhm.
your title is a risk analyst. What does a risk analyst do?
That's a very interesting question. And sometimes I'm going to try to do my best to simply explain it to you. But we, the risk analyst engineers at Westinghouse, we use a method that it's called probabilistic risk assessment. And this method is basically used to systematically evaluate the risk involved on every stage of a complex technological entity. In this time, it's the nuclear power plants. And we currently use it to assess the potential risk associated with, for example, national and international power plants, depending on who's the client, of course. And we evaluate the likelihood of an accident or a certain incident or event happening, and what would be the possible consequences of such events. And also, how can we mitigate it? Not only the consequences, but if this happens, what else? Like what's the plan B? What's plan C, D? And well, when it comes to nuclear power plants, we do have a lot of information about the many different systems or many different parts and the components that make it up. So, for example, I may know how often a particular type of bulb has been used and how many times it has failed over a year. And all of this information help us to understand how often a certain problem might occur and how can we mitigate it in case that occurs or not. So that's it. That's what I do. And that's how I enjoy it, because I work very closely to any like topics and actions related specifically to safety. Not only about risk, but safety as well.
Gotcha. Okay. And I mean, before we start recording, you mentioned that you guys were in an outage right now. So is that for a specific plant, or you're helping out like with the turnaround?
Yeah, it is actually the outage of Unit 1. Well, it's going to be the outage of Unit 1 in October at Comanche Peak Nuclear Power Plant, which
Oh,
is
okay.
located at the north of Texas.
Yeah.
But, us risk analysts work before we even schedule the outage, while we schedule it, and we are designing it along with the managers at the plant, and then during the outage and after the outage, during the start of the plant.
Yeah.
So a lot of work.
So I had these questions written down, but do you think the level of risk that the nuclear industry takes is too much, too little? Are they too safe? And I want to preface this a little bit with looking at other energy sources. And I mean, I come from not the nuclear industry, but certainly
Yeah,
other energy background. And then when I hear about some processes that occur in the nuclear industry, I kind of scratch my head and think like, wow, the cost benefit of this, like, what are we protecting against? What's the hazards? So I'm curious on your
right.
perspective. Like, are there some things that you do that you're like, man, this is kind of frivolous and we could get around it? Or other things that you're like, well, we should actually pay a little bit more attention to this?
I think that's another very interesting question that I get asked a lot, like how much is too much, talking
Yeah.
about risk within the nuclear industry. And I do believe that nothing in life comes without risk. And as a nuclear risk analyst, I can tell you that the risk and mitigation of it is something that the nuclear industry takes very careful consideration, unlike other industries. I don't think it is too much, but probably the media or the people that has no experience with this type of industry thinks that there's more that we can do, that it's not enough.
Well, it's never
And let
enough,
me tell
right?
you,
Like, you're
on the
chasing it to zero,
contrary, I
which is
guess we
impossible.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's easier to build, I don't know, many other things than a nuclear power plant. And sometimes because of this. And it's okay. It's okay to be careful. It's okay to have certain risk assessment. I understand it. But it is not balanced, you
Yeah.
know, within the industry. And yeah, I think that's part of an issue.
Yeah.
But no, it's never too much.
Okay. So I mean, if you can, let's chat a little bit about Westinghouse. And it's okay, all good if you give party line, because I know they're a big company and you're not a spokesperson for them. So, But what kind of projects does, I mean, well, first off, let's just give an overview of who Westinghouse is for folks that are unfamiliar, which would be uncommon if they know about the nuclear industry and they're listening to this podcast. But if they don't, then they may not. But yeah, well, let's start there. Then I can ask about kind of a couple other systems. So
Sure. So Westinghouse Electric Company, I love where I work, and you can tell by how I speak about my day-to-day activities.
yeah,
It's a company that was initially developed by George Westinghouse. So he's the founder, closely to the 90s, 50s. So it's been a long time since this company was created. And it has always been focused on the development and advancement of engineering projects and technology. So we not only work with nuclear power plants, for example, we also develop certain technologies for households or certain technologies for even other type of industries. My focus is on the nuclear energy technology. And we not only do, for example, risk assessment, we also develop new technology. We are also focused on many different areas regarding the development and also improvement of existing technology. So that's what we do as a huge team.
I love it.
And
I'm personally
yeah,
really excited about your guys' eVinci reactor, right? Like,
me too.
yeah. Do you want to give the audience kind of an overview of what that is?
Yeah, of course. Evinci, it's like a prototype of a micro reactor. So what does that mean? To put it on a very general way, there are three types of nuclear reactors. So it could be the conventional ones, which are the huge nuclear power plants that are able to feed electrically a whole city. And then we have the small modular reactors, which is a smaller version of this type of reactors. And these ones produce less power compared to these stationary plants, but they can be transported. So they can also, for example, feed small towns or small projects. For example, if you are building at a certain area that is not actually surrounded by power lines, well, you get to use an SMR, and they're great. And eVinci are a smaller version of this smart modular reactor. And this one is still under development and under the request of certain permits and approvals, but it's the idea to be like a smaller version of an SMR, right? So it's going to be transportable, same as the other one. It's going to need less maintenance, less fuel. The risk analyses are doing good, so less damage control, to put it that way, or less risk to have consequences or bad consequences, the ones that we don't like.
Gotcha. Yeah, it'll be an incredible technology once it's released. So, but I mean, the AP1000, right? You guys designed this reactor and you built several of them across the world in China and Georgia. Like, it's a really cool technology and really super safe. And yeah, I don't know.
It's safer, even more safer than the ones that we have.
It didn't need to be any safer, and we made it safer, right? Yeah.
Yes, because of pressure, if you ask me, but
Yeah.
it's okay. I guess it's okay.
Well, circling back on this idea, there's a video that Brett Kugelmass, so he's the Titans of Nuclear guy, and he's spoken a lot publicly, but he puts out this industry about like why is everyone so scared of nuclear, and he
Yeah.
kind of brings together some compelling points in the video and says, well, they sell fear, right, at the core, like that we're not building new reactors, so they're selling fear. As an outsider, I sometimes agree with him. Like when I look at it in the industry, and I think that's kind of what the industry's chased for the past 10, 20, 30 years, and certainly changing now with building new reactors. But I'm just curious on your take on that.
Well, I do agree with certain parts of his video. There is always going to be room for improvement on how we communicate about nuclear energy to the public. In my opinion, historically, nuclear energy has faced challenges in public perception due to mainly because of misinformation and misconceptions. And it is crucial to focus on accurate and balanced communication that emphasizes the benefits, and not only the benefits, but also the safety measures and the huge potential of nuclear power. So engaging, for example, in open and transparent conversations while addressing the concerns of the public and also educating them can help to reshape the narrative surrounding the nuclear energy. So I'm not going to say he was lying, But there are certain, for example, even terminology or technicisms that people usually don't understand. And I like this example very much, which is about criticality. Do you know what this criticality refers in the energy industry, nuclear
I do,
energy
but
industry?
others may not. So
So, long story short, criticality, whenever you hear the reactor has gone critical on a movie, it's like, oh my goodness, something is going to, work its way out of the boom. And we don't want that. But criticality, in fact, refers to a state in which a nuclear reactor or other fissile material system is able to sustain a self-sustaining chain reaction. So in a critical state, as we call it, there is a balance between the production and the loss of neutrons within our system. And this allows for a sustained nuclear fission reaction. Everything that enters goes out, and that's an equilibrium. So whenever you listen, the reactor has gone critical, it's time to clap. It's time to be happy because that's a good thing. So
it's almost like you could rebrand it and say the reactor is fissioning in a balanced state, right?
the reactor is stable. It's
Yeah, it's
sustaining a
stable.
chain reaction.
Critical sounds like, I mean, it's a negative word, right? It's kind of
It may
unfortunately.
sound negative, even though that's not the meaning of it,
Yeah.
according to this context. But it's one of the many examples that I usually use with my family or with my friends, trying to explain that it is not bad. It is actually okay to use the word criticality, because that way you get to show people the correct vocabulary. So
Yeah.
that's also a good thing. It's not like, oh my goodness, I'm never going to say nuclear. Another example is that when I recently started working at supporting this nuclear power plant in Texas, I saw a couple of documents in which the name of the plant was different. It was called Comanche Peak Steam Generator Station. While that is true, because we generate the steam at that plant, they decided to take out the word nuclear because that was scaring other contractors. Just because it had the word nuclear. That's another example. Why should we be scared about the word nuclear?
Yeah, it's so strange.
Yeah, and that happens. And probably I have many more examples about it, but that's an example. And that's also something that I look to do, or I was looking to do ever since I started my Twitter account, to use the correct vocabulary. And for those who doesn't know, let me teach you, let me give you the resources so you can have an informed decision or an informed opinion, better way. Yeah.
I like that. You're a good spokesperson. I mean, you're compelling to listen to, and you can break things down pretty easily. I mean, I've only talked to you for a short time, but I've already realized that. So
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I like the criticality example, especially, well, let's call it like underbalanced fission or overbalanced fission rather than critical or super critical, right? Like, cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about Twitter. So as I said at the beginning of the episode, Nuclear Hazelnut, that's your handle on Twitter. Before we dive into the kind of why Twitter, I want to know why Nuclear Hazelnut.
So that's a very funny story, and hopefully you won't get disappointed with what's behind it. So my last name is Avellaneda, which in Spanish is very similar to the word avellana, which in English means hazelnut. And Avellana, or even Hazelnut, has been my nickname for a couple of friends and even family of mine. And they're still calling me that way. So when I started with this little project of Twitter, I was like, what should be my name? Nuclear Jenifer? No, that doesn't sound cool. That doesn't sound exciting. What about Nuclear Hazelnut? It's small and nuclear. So that's the story behind it. I know.
No, it's fun.
I know.
So, I mean, has Twitter been useful for you? You're pretty active on Twitter, right?
Yeah, although not lately. I'm going to blame it on the outages. But I try to. Whenever I hear certain news or certain amazing advancements, I try to share it through my Twitter. And I know with a simple like, in a simple retweet, or a simple share, that information will reach to many more people that I can ever imagine. So
I mean, you're more active than me. I'm scrolling through your Twitter now and posting a couple times a week or several times a week. Like, certainly more.
I try to do it, more often than I actually intended. And I'm also behind the account, one of the many faces behind the US Women in Nuclear Instagram account. So whenever I hear something very interesting, it's like, whether should I share it on this platform or both platforms? It's always have like many things in mind. But I try to be very active. I try to share my experience. I not only want to share the news, for example, because anyone can read the news if you have access to the internet, but I mainly try to share my experience as a woman in nuclear and also a young generation in nuclear, because I'm not going to lie, the age gap that there is between, for example, my colleagues and myself, or colleagues like my age, is very huge, super huge. So what I'm also trying to do with this Twitter project, or Twitter handle, is to reach out to younger generations and invite them to become part of this incredible industry. You don't need to be an engineer. You can be anything else, but come to the nuclear side.
I like that. Do you think it's been effective changing hearts and minds?
Probably. Although I'm not looking to change people's minds, I'm trying to inform them.
I like it.
And there you go. Here is the information. Here are the resources. You get to have your own opinion. I'm not an influencer. I'm not trying on being an influencer, but I like to share with you what I know and where to look for information according to my experience.
That makes sense.
And there you go.
Yeah.
You have the tool.
How everyone talks about echo chambers and listening to their tribe and getting caught and just talking to the same people. How have you thought about that, or how do you break out of that? I don't know if Twitter or the algorithm.
I don't know what's
sorry.
an echo chamber.
You say something and then it's echoed by your peers, and that people there's confirmation bias, right? So people only kind of listen to what their ideas are, and there's not adequate discourse, or yeah.
Well, the things that I also, and thank you for teaching me a new term. Part of what I also try to do is to create educated discussions or conversations throughout anything that I post. And I've seen, for example, someone like, yeah, we should all turn off nuclear, shut it down because it's very bad. Look at Germany. And there another person is like, no, I have this report, for example, from the MIT, the latest report of the MIT that says nuclear energy, it's a key component, to keep fighting climate change or to keep fighting global warming. And there goes like a thread, people responding to one another. And they also teach me. I can also learn from what I'm reading. And that's what I try to do, not only to echo what I say or for people to share it. No, that's not my main purpose. My main purpose is, as I told you, to give you the tools and to give you a sneak peek of what it is to be working within the nuclear industry.
Cool. I love that.
That's it.
I like this idea about also learning. I remember back before Twitter, which is weird to think about, and before a lot of social media, or in the MySpace days, really. I was entering industry, and I remember thinking about, because I was coming out of engineering school, and a lot of people were the smartest guys in the room, right? And you'd look it up to executives and managers, and you're like, how did they get all of this knowledge, and how do they make decisions? What's their process?
Absolutely.
Right? And like, how are they bringing in information? And that was a question that I asked frequently. It's like, how are the decision makers in society and companies like actually bringing in information? What news outlets are they reading? What data sources do they have? Yeah, what newspaper, right? And what subscriptions do they subscribe to? And I think your anecdote about like being able to share information quickly on Twitter and really find a lot of what you need and a lot of what you don't need is like really valuable.
Sometimes.
Right? So I think it's fun that you shared that or identified it. What was this Women in Nuclear, Women in Energy, that page that you mentioned that you were a contributor to?
Yeah, so there's an organization throughout, well, I think it's globally present, but there are like a few chapters or a couple of different chapters. They could be regional or even national. US Women in Nuclear is an organization, part of one of the many chapters that actually exist, part of the Women in Nuclear, which is an organization that tries to unite women, not only women, also men. Everyone is welcome, but mainly women, because we tend to be a minority within the industry, the nuclear energy and technology industry. So this one, it's kind of give us the tools to be more interactive and to get to know people out there that it's in the industry and probably have some of the challenges that we are experiencing. For example, as women, whenever you enter the company, you generally see only men taking very important positions, like VP or president or manager. And that is something that we are trying to change. Like, hey, if I have the qualifications, if I have the skills, I want to keep contributing to this company or to this organization. So Women in Nuclear and US Women in Nuclear put together certain, for example, presentations or tools to prepare and improve yourself to fight for those type of positions, for example. And if you are not interested on pursuing a leadership position, they can also help you out. What's interesting you? What are you right now? Well, I do this for a living. You should come here and let me talk to you about what I do, and you could apply. I could help you. It's just an organization that relates women within the industry.
That's great. Yeah, I think
like
that's
that.
very positive. I'm aware of, so I live in Denver, and there's an organization in town, and it's a nationwide group, but it's called Women's Energy Network. And so several of my friends volunteer for it, but kind of, it sounds similar. And right, it's all people are welcome, not just women, but they want to promote and further the careers of women and empower them to be successful. So I'm hopeful that it's changing. Absolutely. Right? I would love to see more women in the industry. I think it's fantastic.
It's getting better. We are getting there.
Okay. So you had a few specific tweets that were most recent. And depending on when we publish this, I'm sure they'll have more. So people can go and check that out. But there's some kind of fun stories that I wanted to chat about with you. So
is this a test?
The nuclear in Brazil. And actually maybe more broadly, because you were at IAEA, curious on your perspective, nuclear in kind of Latin America. Like, do you think that there's potential for growth? Do you think that there's going to be more nuclear in Latin America? Like, how do we make this happen? Or maybe just what's the Brazil story about, if you remember? And if you don't, that's okay.
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, regarding your question involving Latin America, the Latin American and the Caribbean countries, unfortunately, the energy industry, including the nuclear energy industry, it's strongly related with political advancements, and political beliefs. So, and I'm going to put as an example Mexico first, because that's where I grew up. Everything has to do with the misconception of nuclear energy, because many people, including, for example, my family, when I started, like saying out loud, I wanted to do this for a living, they were like, oh my God, that's radioactive and you're going to get cancer. And they're like, no, in fact, nuclear technology can cure cancer. Did you know that? Yeah. So those type of misconceptions and also political challenges is what's driving the path or the development of nuclear energy and nuclear technologies through all those countries. Now that you mentioned this exciting news about Brazil, Angra Unit 3, so they have a nuclear power plant called Angra. I don't know the full name, and I'm very sorry about that. I should. But the first two units, Angra 1 and Angra 2, are currently, they represent approximately 3% of electricity provided or produced, nuclear energy produced in Brazil. So what they are trying to do, basically, is to restart the construction of Angra 3, which is going to be a third unit, a third PWR reactor. The construction of it originally started in the 1980s, but it got suspended twice, in 2010 and I think 2015. Everything because of political challenges. Call it also economical or call it change in government. But it was strongly related to political events that were going on within that country. And well, there's almost 60% of this project that has already been completed. So, there's just a small step or a couple of more steps to have it. And they are expecting for this plant to start operating probably at the end in 2026, more or less. So I guess let's cross fingers so we can welcome another commercial reactor in Latin America, this time in Brazil.
Why doesn't Mexico have nuclear?
We do have nuclear. We have two. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, We have two WRs, so they are boiling water reactors, and they're located in Veracruz at the Gulf of Mexico. Very interesting. And we also have research reactors. They're located in Toluca, I think, which is near Mexico City. And that reactor is usually used for research and development purposes, and the other one is to produce electricity, which more or less represent 2 to 3% of Mexico's electricity, if I'm not mistaken. All right, I'm not sure about those numbers, the 2 or 3%. What about the development of this technology in Mexico? I don't know. The current president is scared about the word nuclear. I, of course, do not agree with him, but it is what it is. And they are proximate to have an elections, and I guess we'll see how it goes. It's always very complicated, and it's unfortunate at the same time that it's not mainly focused on scientists' opinions and experience, but in politicians.
Laguna Verde provides 3 to 4% of Mexico's electricity. Look at that.
That's correct.
I didn't know. I learned something. That's great.
Yeah.
You also posted about Kairos's pilot project.
Yeah, I guess the reactor is called Hermes, right?
Hermes.
Yeah. All we know is not the brand, not the luxury brand, but the reactor. So according to that new, Hermes will be building an additional reactor next to Hermes 1. And this one is going to be Hermes 2. And this would be the subsequent iteration, demonstrating the complete system architecture and design of the company Kairos Power, right? So they're basically trying to focus on building up something from all the information that they already gathered and developed from the other design, which is Hermes 1. That is very exciting because as permits just keep being approved, that means the nuclear energy industry or nuclear industry itself keeps growing. The more development, more research, more advancement, and who knows? Probably the next nuclear power plant is on its way.
That'd be awesome. So I had this question listed, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but do you think the NRC will ever be reformed? Or maybe even if that's necessary? I don't know.
Bureaucracy has always been challenging to probably understand or even to talk about, because I've been in both sides, on the side of the public eye and on the side of the private eye. And there are many things going on. And for example, an NRC reform would depend on political dynamics, which can change over time, as we keep saying, as an example of Latin America. So, for example, public sentiment, technological advancements, industry developments, learnings, and policy considerations all play a significant role in shaping discussions and potential reforms. So I would like to say, please, NRC, just whenever you see a submittal, just approve it.
Yeah, right.
Let us
the box. Sounds great.
But I understand there's a process behind it. Yeah. But there's a process behind it. Unfortunately, it usually takes longer than expected. But I guess it is what it is. Whether or not it needs to be reformed, I don't think it's on me. I would say probably they need more people. But why if they don't? I don't know, because I'm not in there, but that's my opinion from the outside.
Okay, so Jenifer, Nuclear Hazelnut, this has been great. What are some of the most impactful steps that you think we can take to build nuclear ASAP, and how can people help?
Simple answer, and I'm going to repeat the word: simplifying and expediting the permits.
You're from the NRC. Okay, all right.
Standardizing certain things. Standardization of process, or probably pre-approval of certain designs, also financial support. There's a lot of support to solar, wind, and that's a good thing. But what about nuclear? Don't forget about nuclear. 24 hours, 7 power, and many, many, many jobs. So don't forget about nuclear. Give us financial support, pre-approval, standardization.
I love that.
That's what I say we need.
Before we end, I wanted to circle back because this just came to mind. In your job as a probabilistic risk assessment, or using that, I mean, are you using a lot of statistics and then like data, and so like you'll use like null hypothesis or t-test to like say what's the probability or right? I mean,
Yeah, it's a lot of probability, to put it that way. We certainly gather two type of data. One is coming directly from the plant, and the other one is historical data coming from all the industry. And we compare that data, and then we come up with the number. And that number ends up being, this is the probability of getting core damage, for example. And it's super small, super, super small. Is a number times 10 to the minus 7 or to the minus 6. Super, super small annually. So that's what we do. We basically gather a lot of information. As I was previously explaining to you, for the example, I have a valve on this specific system, and it has failed only once when called upon in a year. So I get my number, boom, 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 and this is a probability. And I have like many different other valves and many different other systems. And those numbers all build up to give me a number, which is a probability of having, for example, a certain event. And what would happen if I lost this pump? Oh, I have this other one. What would happen if you lost a plan B? I have a plan C.
yeah.
I know how to handle it. So that's why the probability of having almost any type of events, undesired events, are very small.
Yeah. I'm curious. I mean, if a plant exploded, all of the data that we have now demonstrates, in my opinion, when I've looked at it, like the probability of people dying and being hurt from a radioactive release is also very small. Meaning like
very small. First
so
of all,
I guess if you trace it all the way to the finish line, then like the probability is near to zero anyway for the hazard. So like, what are we actually protecting against?
Absolutely. So first of all, what I was going to say is, for example, if you are thinking something for like Chernobyl, that won't ever happen again.
Yeah,
like
and even
ever,
if
ever.
you
That's
did, the number of people that
impossible to happen
died
again.
was minuscule compared to other energy accidents.
For the starters, now we have a containment, like that little house that houses the reactor. We have a containment, which is like approximately 1 meter, meter and a half thick. So imagine that. And secondly, not only speaking on the technological side, which is chances are near zero, I'd also like to say that any nuclear power plant, and I'm now speaking from the ones that are in the USA because are the ones that I know the most, work hand in hand with the people in charge of the locations there. So, for example, they are continuously working with all the people in charge of managing the emergencies, and they have a plan and they have annual meetings or twice a year. I don't know how often, but they do have meetings, and it's like, okay, let's go over the steps again. If this happens, what would we tell people? So they are continuously working hand in hand with the people in charge of managing the emergencies at the town or even the cities, depending on the location of the plant. And they go step by step. Okay, if this happens, I'm going to tell you this, and this is your person of contact, and you should do this. You should guide the people to this place, and blah blah blah. So there are even rules, and it is planned. There's been a risk assessment for that. So even if you're wondering, okay, I have the worst case scenario and the containment didn't work, what should I do? There's a plan.
Yeah.
There's a plan of that. So as I was telling you, we have a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan, all the letters on the alphabet. We have many ways of mitigating certain events of happening. And even if they happened, we also have many ways of, approaching the consequences.
Okay, so Jenifer, leave us with your most positive vision of the future. What's the world going to look like in the next 10 to 20 years? And how are we going to help it get there?
Hopefully nuclear.
Go nuclear.
That's the thing. Yeah, I want to see more people involved in the nuclear industry, not only the nuclear energy industry, which is the one that I worked on, but as we've been talking about, there are many benefits surrounding the nuclear technology, medical, agricultural, in the space, in the water, on our rivers. It's a lot of benefits, and we need people to start working on this as I told you, there's a huge age gap that we have right now between, for example, myself and my colleagues, which are super experts on the nuclear energy industry. But come to the nuclear side. You don't need to be an engineer. You don't need to be a scientist. You could be, for all I care, a publicist or a marketing people. It doesn't matter. Everyone, every profession is welcome throughout the nuclear energy industry, and we need more people to keep developing and to keep not only supporting, improving, but also taking advantage of the many benefits of this technology, including the energy, which is 24/7 clean energy.
There you go. Jenifer, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mark.